Okay, welcome to this free webinar of the On Think Tank School free webinar series of 2019. We've already quite had a few already, and we're going to have many more. These free webinars, we get practitioners, we get people from around the world working in think tanks, supporting think tanks or funding think tanks, to tell us about something they are working on. Tell us about something they've learned from their own experiences, from their own work, and to share them with you and get you to talk to us about them. Now, today we have Adanna Shallowe. She's Senior Global Manager at the Royal Society of Arts. That's the RSA, based in the UK. The RSA is quite likely the oldest think tank in existence, founded some 300 or so years ago in the UK as part of a very interesting movement of learned societies that were being founded around the world. I like the story because it can be traced to Peru, to a think tank that was founded in the late 1800s, which makes Peru the source of the think tanks in the Americas, even before think tanks in the US or Canada. That doesn't exist anymore, but the RSA does. She's responsible for accelerating the growth of the RSA global hubs through partnerships, enabling them to become local drivers of social change. And before that, she was project lead for the Skills and Development Program for UK participation in international skills competition. And Adanna, I've known Adanna now for some time, and she's been, I think, leading not just the growth of the RSA global hubs, but certainly the growth of a network of individuals and organizations around the world from the RSA. So I'm sure you're facing a number of challenges that you are learning how to address along the way. So the way these webinars work is Adanna will give a short presentation, share some of her ideas, and then it's over to you to ask any questions you have. To do that, please do so using the chat box. There is a chat option in Zoom that you can use. Just write your question. I'll keep a note on those questions, and then I'll pass them on to Adanna. I do ask you to mute your microphones, please, while you are on this call, so that you don't get any interference. Now, this webinar is being recorded, and so not too long after the webinar is over, we'll be sending you a link to the video of the webinar and other resources that we put together for you. Great. So, Adanna, thank you for joining us from sunny London. In wintry Lima. I was saying it's so cloudy here that we had a solar eclipse yesterday, and we didn't notice it. It was just nothing happened. So thank you. Are you there, Adanna? I think your screen just froze as I said thank you. Or I said me. Hello? So I think everybody else is frozen. Oh, hi. Okay, we're back. Something happened. Go ahead, Adanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enrique, and thanks to all the participants on this webinar. It is an incredible honor for me and privilege to be part of the On Think Tank community. I've enjoyed their conferences and their interactions over the years, and it's such a great community to be part of and to exchange different ideas and to just try to figure out how we all can deal with our various challenges, whether we work for think tanks or other social change organizations. So thank you very much. Yeah, as Enrique said, I am based in London. I'm the Senior Global Manager at the RSA. Enrique mentioned a bit about the RSA earlier, and yes, we are indeed the oldest think tank in the world. We were founded off of a coffee shop in the centre of London. Sir William Shipley brought a bunch of his friends together, and they were very much engaged in how to deal with the challenges facing the society at the time. Granted, those were the challenges of the 18th century, which is very different from the challenges facing us in the 21st century. What I wanted to talk to you about today was I, as part of my role, also host a global think tank network. So I'll get into the purpose of the global think tank network, what we do. And also I really wanted to have like an open conversation about what challenges we are facing, what questions have come up, what lessons we have learned over time. And I just compiled a bunch of top tips that could help those who are trying to formulate a network with your own partners. They may also be think tank organizations or other institutions, and what a challenge that is, especially when you're dealing with it over a region where different institutions are based in different countries and different contexts. So just a little bit about the Global Think Tank Network. We really only started last year in March. It was very much the impetus of our CEO, Matthew Taylor. Matthew brought together a group of organizations and institutions that we have done work or had close relationships with over time, and thought that it would be best if we tried to collaborate on different projects and actually to address what was quite potent at the time, which is how do we achieve change in different country contexts so that we could maximize our footprint and actually maximize our voice. The group is basically made up about 5 institutions, one of which obviously is the RSA. We have affiliate organizations in Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. We also have a content lead based in Scotland. And in addition to the RSA, there are other organizations who are part of this network. Demos Helsinki, which is obviously based in Finland. A progressive think tank based in Berlin called Das Progressive Zentrum, a community of social change entrepreneurs and a network called Alt Now. They work out of Denmark and Canada, and also the Wales Centre for Public Policy, which is the think tank for the Welsh government. And they're very much preoccupied with doing evidence-based change in order to support the policy direction of the Welsh government. And the main purpose of the Global Think Tank Network was to exist as a network of strategically aligned institutions and very much to have a common voice. Matthew, our CEO, was very much keen on us collaborating so that we be able to impact not just change based in the UK and in our different hubs, but also in different jurisdictions. We also were keen on identifying how we can have scalable impact in terms of our voice, our digital footprint, how we can possibly increase our funding opportunities for each institution, which was identified as a long-term goal. And because our thematic areas of focus was on the future of work, i.e. how the changing nature of work is dealing with climate change and technology, and also inclusive growth in cities. How can broad-based inclusive growth be something that is an attainable objective, particularly in an urban context? We chose these themes because the institutions that were involved were already doing funded work in these areas. So it didn't require us to seek additional funding. So we felt it was such a great opportunity for us to collaborate and share best practice across these key thematic areas. But when we initially met back in April last year, we said that this was just a starter. We would definitely look to expand into other themes, but because we had robust muscular legacy in those particular areas, we thought that this would be a good place to start and also to try to figure out if we could actually work together. You may have noticed that I mentioned a couple of times that our CEO is very much involved in the initial meetings around this network. And that was very key for us. We were able to get our CEO's endorsement, and thus that kind of signal to the rest of the organization that this was something important and a priority, and this is something that we can definitely make into a thing internally. I get to that towards the end when I talk about the different tips. So over the last year, we've been having these monthly virtual meetings. We decided that where possible, we will meet on a monthly basis and share best practice, what each other is working on, what challenges we are facing. Of course, limited to those themes, but also throwing out different ideas if we are thinking about exploring our projects into different areas. We also felt it was important to build a repository or resource for our research material. So we used off-the-shelf platform. I think it's Microsoft Teams, and that is something that each institution could have access to and can upload and share files and also have an interactive conversation. So outside of the monthly virtual meetings, we had this ongoing conversation as well, which basically built a repository for all our materials and our conversations. It also was a good way to have like an artifact, like this network was a thing and it had a legacy, and you could see almost from the initial meeting right up until our last meeting what has taken place. So it has like a track record of what activities have happened. And then we thought it was also really important, because we're all doing individually funded work in these different areas, we felt it was really important to build a timeline where the projects can basically tap into each other's ongoing activities. So for example, if the RSA was hosting a Future of Work event, we would extend an invitation to our colleagues, and they will also be able to identify when that's coming up and how they could access that event. And that was something that was really important, both currently and going forward, because we felt that we needed different touch points where we'd be able to be in person, because a lot of our meetings are virtual, and we felt it was really important that we have these identify these possible networking opportunities. And then what we thought that would be a good aspiration to have is, how can we use each other's networks and partners? For the RSA, obviously, that's really critical. We have about 30,000 fellows globally. So for us, our footprint is quite big. For other institutions, their footprint, they don't have fellows, but they have associations with partner organizations. For example, Das Progressive Zentrum, based in Berlin, has a lot of relationships with other think tanks and similar institutions in Eastern Europe, for example, which is something that we can't access. So we thought that that was a good way where we could each piggyback on each other's existing relationships in these particular thematic areas. So there was definitely a commitment on all the members, I would call them members, to participate monthly and also to kind of engage in these activities over the past year. And I have to say it has been quite successful since we really started in May of last year. And if you're thinking about hosting a similar network, I think it's really important from the outset that you identify who's going to hold space. And from the very beginning, through the endorsement of our CEO, we, the RSI, basically volunteered to hold the space for the network. And that was something that we felt was both a coordinating role in terms of logistics when we set up meetings, and how we shepherd in new material, for example, through the different meetings. But also we felt it was really important that we also drive the quote-unquote agenda of the group, so that yes, it's collaborative, but it's always something that is looked after by somebody within the network. So it has been really good in terms of what works. Was we've been able to share best practice over our current themes. We've been able to explore different approaches. We've used it as, we, the RSA, have used it as a forum to test our research ideas and avenues for engagement. I could give an example here. Our former head of our Future Work Center, when he was thinking about exploring scenario planning, he contacted our the research team in Demos Helsinki to see how they approached a similar methodology, because they were very much engaged in scenario planning as well. So he was able to get lessons learned, you know, from research team to research team, how to do this approach. So that was really valuable, and that's something we would not have been able to access otherwise. We also thought that what really worked for us was our access to the network increases the value to our funders. So usually when we're writing proposals for whatever thematic area, not necessarily pertaining to the thematic areas identified, we always include a bit about the RSA hosts this network, and we were able to draw on different country context and research experience from not just our existing think tank internally, but also think tanks based in other countries. And that has been quite a powerful USP for us. Then, as I said earlier, we were able to test and explore methodologies by the different institutions, and this really allowed us to enhance our opportunity for cross-pollination. So our association with Demo Helsinki was able to merge with our existing think tank doing work on health and inclusive growth, and we even decided to collaboratively bid for a project with the Health Foundation based in the UK, and we have been successfully working on that project so far. In terms of the challenges, because we've pretty much been meeting, it will be about a year now, because really since May last year to May this year, so a little over a year, we have reached a point where we think we need to start to elevate the work of the think tank. So we have been meeting and sharing best practice. Now we're very much exploring what comes next. How do we elevate our work? And right now we're kind of engaged with how can we redefine the purpose? Do we explore other thematic areas? The RSA is very much an advocate and a proponent of deliberative democracy, and Matthew, our CEO, talks a lot about democratic renewal. We're exploring, should this be something we should enter into with the network? Is there appetite within other members of the network to participate in that same thematic area? We're also thinking about how can we make this more visible. Right now, it's very much a back office, back end, back of house type of arrangement. It is not a front of house. This is not something on our websites. This is not something we put in any marketing material or collateral. So we're very much thinking, okay, is this something we need to make more visible? And could this be, while we make it more visible, then we can actually recruit new members. Right now, the network, as you know, is quite small. It's about 5 members, and it has a very distinct progressive agenda. And this was something that was set at the outset. Should we continue with that agenda? Do we only recruit members who express that progressive ethos? Someone who is very much deep in the hosting of the network. I'm very concerned about making sure we go deep instead of go wide, to use a European Union analogy, to encourage more quote-unquote stickiness amongst the membership, so that we work more together, we become more visible, and then that could be an attractive proposition to possibly onboard other people. But we have been proposing, someone from Demo Helsinki proposed a possible think tank from Sweden. We've had indications from other members to invite other possible think tanks to participate in the meetings, or even to showcase their work. But this is something we're kind of constantly exploring. So, you know, what makes it global instead of international? And would it be important to reach out to other think tanks in the US, Australia, the ASEAN, the African continent, etc.? And then, as I said before, you know, what themes are we going to be looking at? The future of work and inclusive growth in cities was very much a starter for 10. We've had conversations about bringing on board other new themes, but I think beyond that is the bigger and more long-term sort of thematic definition. What is our agenda in terms of themes, and how can we develop a criteria where we move from one theme to the next? And that's something we're kind of not explicitly talking about, but something that's quite implicit in our monthly meetings. Because as I said at the beginning, one of our key long-term ambitions is to actually work together on a project, and so that we can attract funding opportunities. And for us to reach that level, we have to really think about our research themes and our criteria. In terms of the sort of the top tips, and this is something on Think Tanks will share afterwards. We came across through the work my team from the fellowship community came across this community canvas, which was basically an open source document talking about how do you form community and how do you form networks and how do you make sure the networks are sustainable. And it's really a little short list of how do you bring people together and let it not be a one-off, but ensure that is something that is creating sharing and learning and growing. And the community canvas kind of identified different, like a little checklist in terms of things that we need to do. So one thing that the network, the canvas identified was, you have to identify a purpose. What's the purpose of the network? And this is something obviously that for us, we're constantly evolving. And I'm sure this would be of interest to you who are interested in forming partnerships and networks yourselves. And what's the identity? For us, it's, we really want a progressive group of think tanks that are strategically aligned, that can be a bigger voice, and can be global, not just, international. And this is something I think you should pay attention to when you're trying to form your own networks. For us, also the values was very much implicit in the formation of the think tank network. All our institutions are pretty much progressive institutions, or institutions that are interested in the progressive agenda. This is something that has to be at the core and the part of the network, because that will keep everyone keyed in and on the same page and speaking a common language. That doesn't mean that we do not invite challenge. Actually, this is something that we very much want to have within the network, but we're still trying to work out how that happens. In terms of branding, we don't have, as I said before, we don't have a branding proposition for the network, but this is something that we're grappling with now in terms of how to make it more visible. How do you define success? And for us, very early on, we said success is us working collaboratively on a project that is funded, and we'll be able to execute the project in different country contexts. So myself, when I say myself, the RSA, another institution in the US, and possibly another institution in Germany working together on a project on a key thematic area, and there's impact on the ground. That is something that we see as a success for the network. Then, not to be ignored, rules and rituals. I think that's really, really important. What was really great about the network from the outset is that everyone was committed to meeting monthly, and we meet monthly. Everybody's committed to meeting in person at some point in time, and we have done that over the course of the years. Not unfortunately not together, but we have ambitions to bring the institutions together for a summit, if you will. And then rules, what as long as there's presence, we don't vote on anything. It's quite collaborative, it's quite informal, it's quite very much about exchanging lessons learned and being completely transparent, but also really much having the endorsement of senior management. So this, because this is seen as something that is a priority for the organizations. And I would advise, when you're thinking about forming your own network, or even if you have existing networks, really go through these different checklists to really identify what the whole network, what the purpose and definition is about. And that really will sustain, I think, longevity for the network, and hopefully will lead to further sustainability. That's it on my end. I'm open to any questions you have, and I'm sure Kike has some questions that he you must have put in the chat. But thanks for your time.
Thank you, Adanna. That was very useful. I think I went away for a second. My connection was strong, so there's a blip on the recording. I apologize, but I didn't miss anything. So I think for those watching later, Jonathan is asking a question, so I'll go straight to that. You mentioned the importance of stating a purpose for the network. How did you formulate your own purpose, and what does it look like?
Well, when we met initially in, it was March, April of last year, we sort of went around, we as in all the institutions that are part of the network now, and they were all attended by senior managers, directors. The CEO of Demos Helsinki was there. The founder of Demos Helsinki was there. So all our very senior managers attended. We basically talked about what is our point of view. So the RSA spoke about its model of change. Demos Helsinki spoke about their model of change and their legacy, and what we wanted out of a network, what we wanted out of a collaboration. And collectively, we came up with this purpose. This was a purpose that was formulated jointly. And the purpose is to exist as a network of strategically aligned institutions that would lead on a common voice on certain issues. And the certain issues we identified were the future of work and inclusive growth in cities. That's the holding purpose. That might change over time as we try to think about different themes. But I think what you're really getting at is how we came up with the purpose. And it was a joint, collaborative, very much all day in one room, hammering down our purpose. But we were really keen on finding out what each institution's theory of change was as well. Like, how do we see the world and why would this work? Essentially were the two questions we were trying to answer. And then we came up with the purpose. And we've tried to really stick to that. Admittedly, over the last couple of months, we've been thinking about expanding the themes, but that's something that we will eventually do. But, you know, what we want to achieve as part of the network, and why does it work? Why would it make sense for me to collaborate with another, the RSA to collaborate with another institution, and what we want out of it?
Sorry, I've got a cold. Before I go to the other two questions, let me stay on that a little bit longer. You mentioned that you asked what the theories of change of each organization were. So the way that the RSA understands change happening in the UK is probably different, or maybe similar, to the way that Demos Helsinki sees change happening in Finland. The first question is, did you see any differences between the way that the members of this network understood change to happen, or what they thought their contribution was? Mm-hmm. And then I was interested in the fact that one of your members isn't really a think tank, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different type of organization altogether.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that in itself is a challenge. You know, there might be opportunities there, because you might be able to learn something from them that the rest of you don't know about. But certainly heterogeneity in membership makes networks a lot harder to manage.
Yeah, good questions, Enrique. On the first off, I think we basically had a common view, because we spent a lot of time talking about how the traditional way of think tanks working doesn't work in this current climate. I don't know what was happening in the UK at the time, but that was the dominant part of the conversation that Easter, because we felt that, I mean, you know, the big elephant in the room is Brexit, obviously now. We felt that policy no longer matters in this current climate. Actually, politics does. And as the RSA prides itself on being a pretty neutral organization, obviously with a progressive lens, but pretty neutral. But we felt that we couldn't just do research, diagnose a problem, do the research, print out a report, and expect to influence anybody. So that's why we felt that this was really important. This is another tool in the toolbox in terms of how we can see change happening. So I think essentially we were pretty much on the same page. We probably just had different perspectives. So for example, Demos Helsinki does a lot of experimentation, a lot of focus groups, and they have quite a wide portfolio of different stakeholders that they work with, and they have close relationships with Citra and with government of Finland. And we felt that we actually could learn a lot from their level and their background in experimentation. So that was that's actually why we have been closely aligned for a number of years before we even entered this network with them. For AltNow is actually a group of social entrepreneurs, and we felt that the social innovation aspect was something that we could also learn from. They do things very differently in a very open way. It's very much about design thinking and ideation. It's very open, and yes, the RSA does have a design legacy, but we felt that AltNow would bring something more to our work and actually enhance our muscularity in different fields. Actually, on that very same topic, All Now is one of our partners. We have a relationship with, we have a project called Economic Security Impact Accelerator, and All Now has partnered with us on that project, and actually we would not be able to deliver that project without All Now. So yes, heterogeneity can make for a very difficult network, but also when different entities bring together their unique legacy, it actually enhances the whole, because that way we were able to, one, and get involved in this project, but also learn internally and build up our own muscle in terms of what they're really good at. So yeah, I mean, as long as we're on the same page in terms of what we want to achieve, in terms of our purpose, I think everything else will be fine. But I would encourage heterogeneity, because I actually think being in a echo chamber is actually quite destructive.
Sure, that's an interesting point. I mean, I think one of the point of heterogeneity was the differences in the organizations. But you might have heterogeneity from different perspectives of how the world works, etc. It just makes it hard to cater for everybody's needs. But let me move on to Napurna, who asks a question about measuring success. You mentioned one way of measuring success, which is to have a collaborative project that is externally funded. But what other ways she asks, what are the ways, methods you recommend share? I'm assuming to other ways to measure success. One of the things you mentioned made me think of this is you mentioned somebody looking for advice on how to run scenario planning. I wonder if success is simply that there is demand from the members for each other's expertise, and not just that you have an externally funded project.
Yeah, I think we all benefit from using the think tank network as a forum to litmus test out different ideas. I think when my colleague approached Demos Helsinki, he already knew in his mind what he wanted to do, but he just wanted to find out what was Demos Helsinki's experience. That's the scenario planning example. But I think over the months, we have collaboratively said that we're working on a particular research project. Have you all done this before? What do you learn from it? So there's a tangible, that's actually one other thing I should have mentioned, there's a tangible benefit of participating in the network. Sharing ideas, sharing best practice, and sharing lessons learned. That's a tangible thing that everybody gets out of it. And that's quite rare, because we have, I mean, I would actually throw it out to the audience. I would be keen to find out if anyone is involved in networks who are in on the webinar. But I find, having been part of some networks in the past, it's just like a fancy meet and greets, and you schmooze and whatever. But for us, we wanted a tangible benefit that would keep people coming back, and almost reinforcing why the network works, and what are the both tangible and intangible benefits. Tangible benefits is that you could actually talk to somebody and be a soundboard. Intangible benefit is that actually we're all in this thing together, and we're all grappling with how to figure this out in our different country contexts, which is very different, which could be similar in some ways, but we're very different. But we're all grappling with these struggles, how to get funding, how to operationalize, how to have bigger impact. That actually having a buddy sharing the same challenges, it actually feels that we're all part of the same team. So yeah, really reinforcing both the tangible and intangible benefits of the network is really important.
Let me jump to MD Moshen, who asks, how do you keep the organizations motivated? And you sort of address some of that. But how do you handle challenges like free riding in this network?
Let me answer the last one. I don't think we have any free riders, if I'm being honest, but you have to be mindful, Moshen, we are quite small. I think those people involved in networks that are 50 plus, 100 plus, there would be free riders. So we're quite small, so it's quite manageable. I think we have a very high regard for each other as well. I think we all see the benefits of participating. So we don't really waste each other's time. Everybody comes on a call, finds out what everybody's working on, share best practice, and then we think about what's happening at the next meeting. How do you keep them motivated? That's a constant thing for me, particularly because the RSA hosts the network. What has helped that is that we have relationships with people in the network. So we're working with Alt now on a project. We're working with Demos Helsinki on another project. Our senior managers, our CEO sits on the advisory committee for the Wales Centre for Public Policy. So that helps increasing, quote unquote, the stickiness and increasing the touch points, which is really important. I think what I would advise is try to have as much touch points as possible. Our current touch point is our monthly meeting. We have discussed about having an in-person meeting on an annual basis, like an annual summit. We haven't yet figured out how we're going to do that, but that's something that we've been discussing. So have touch points to ensure that there's no free riders if you have a big network. But keeping people motivated is the rituals, is making sure that you have these constant touch points. And actually we also send out stuff to each other. We send each other reports, we communicate via our platform. So that enhances the touch points to keep people engaged and motivated.
I think we used to refer to this when we were working on networks with a colleague, Simon Hearn. We used to refer to this as rhythms and spaces.
Yes.
So you make sure that after a while, people will accept that the monthly Zoom calls or webinars or discussions are going to happen regardless of my presence. And so I start trusting that rhythm and that space, and it becomes part of my routine.
Yeah.
But I have something else you've mentioned that is interesting. Is the network at this moment, does the network feel more a network of individuals? So the people who are the kind of the contact points within each organization. I mean, you are the one coming together with your peers in these other centers. And you have to act as an intermediary between them and your organization, right? Does it feel that you're building that personal relationship first so that you're able to take that to the organizational level? Or does the network feel like it's clearly an organizational network?
Oh, that's a good question. I think right now it does feel like a personal type of network. However, what's really good, the participants that meet on the call, it's almost like we're each institution's ambassador. So we participate on the call and we share information, and then we go back to our institutions and say, guess what the RSA is doing? Or by the way, Demos Helsinki is working on this. And then we put each other in touch with our different research teams. So it's almost like we act like our little group of ambassadors, and then we get whatever the meeting was, whatever was the download from the meeting, and share it with our wider organization. So right now it does feel personal. But imagine once we increase our rituals and our rhythms, I'll steal your word, Enrique, our rhythms, then I think it would feel more organizational. I think that's another way for us to elevate it as well. It has to be organizational. And I think once we try to work out how we're going to do the annual summit, that will become more of a thing. It'll become more tangible to the bigger organization. But we do, across all the different entities, we do know that we have strong relationships. So right now, which is a good example, we're in conversations with DAS Progressive Centrum to co-host an event next year. It is likely as part of that event, we'll probably bring the network together, or the network will be able to curate the event as a big project. But again, as in all institutions, how funding works, could we get time and resources released in order to work on this project? So that's something that we're kind of grappling with at the moment.
Okay, thank you. M. Gaitan asks about the resource you mentioned. I think we can share that with people in an email afterwards, right? So we'll do that.
Yeah.
Shona Olalere asks about membership from beyond Europe, I guess. So is your network working with think tanks in Africa? And do you think it would be easy to find thematic areas, common thematic areas with those countries, maybe in Africa, Europe, and Latin America, that you can
Well,
collaborate in?
that we could collaborate. I mean, yeah, definitely. This is something that I'm quite an advocate of. I've actually used the on Think Tanks directory to try and signpost different um, institutions that we might be working with. Because right now our starter for 10 is our two big thematic areas, and I should emphasize as well for the RSA, inclusive growth in cities and the future of work are two big thematic areas that our think tank works on. So there is already enough interest in those areas. For in terms of looking at the different institutions in different places, I mean, you know, the continent of Africa is going to define probably what the future of work looks like globally, just based on the population growth that is earmarked for the continent. So definitely, I would want to invite and seek out institutions from countries on the continent. I should have mentioned, so part of this call, we actually have someone who I believe, and I may get this wrong, she is of Nigerian heritage. She currently does work for the Open Society Foundation. She's actually based in Chicago. She's an American, but she does work a lot with the tech scene on the continent of Africa, and she has provided some insight on distinct and discrete projects under the Future of Work umbrella. But she's not part of an institution. She actually participates as an individual. But we are exploring definitely different perspectives. For me, looking at the ASEAN region would be quite provocative as well. So I would say yes in the first instance, but it's not an immediate priority.
And I guess you'd be. I mean, I think the process you've gone through, the origins of the network you described is a network of organizations that are doing work on these issues already, that have their own funding to do work on these issues already, and who have worked with each other already, at least with the RSA. And so that common origin allows you to share information more freely, allows you to collaborate. There's a question from Sulamba about the costs of running the network. You know, each organization is kind of covering the costs of your time or the time of your colleagues to engage in these conversations. And that's usually one of the barriers for a lot of organizations to join networks.
Yeah.
If you were to bring in members from Latin America, I know there are big cities in Latin America. There are cities that are facing, everybody's talking about the future of work in Latin America, in Africa, in the Asian region as well. If you were to bring them in, I guess you'd have to expect them to come in as equal partners.
Yeah.
Which would demand that they are doing work on these issues. They have their own funding to work on these issues, and they can cover the costs of someone like you. Otherwise, the relationship would be skewed.
Yeah.
One of you would be the funder, and the other one would be the grantee in that relationship, and that would bring in challenges to the network as it is.
Yeah, definitely.
One more question. Sorry, I think I asked them all, and we're just time. I guess a key question I had for you was, you started by talking about the RSA, you know, as people coming together in a coffee shop. And there's a network there. There's a very informal coming together of people to exchange ideas. You've also talked about the rules and rituals of this network staying on the informal side of things. When do you think might be the right time to formalize things a little bit more?
That's a really good question.
To put it down in writing.
To put it down in writing, to sign an MOU or a document of sorts. Yeah, I think this is something that I think we will, I don't want to say struggle with, but this is something that I think will eventually happen. But I use the European Union example all the time to describe this network. I don't want to put too much formal structure on it, because I feel we're still trying to work our way out We don't want it to be too bureaucratic. I think we're still trying to figure out how we work together. Right now it's quite open, quite casual, and we have space for growth, and there's a quote unquote natural matchmaking. So there have been offline conversations that does with network members that does not actually happen as a network, if you understand what I mean, because two institutions might be working on something and decide to give each other a call just out of the relationship. To formalize it, I think when we are working on a big project that involves a funder and it's different country contexts and stuff, I think that's when the formality will come in. But I think we're probably a couple of years away from that, if I'm being really honest. I know the ambition is there for that to happen. I don't know, how my other colleagues feel about it, but I do think we're away from that as yet. But I do think we do like the informality. Right now, it's casual. It's not too much onus. Remember, each of it, it's not funded yet, and I think that's going to form part of that conversation. If we do increase some sort of formality, there must be some funding allocation that brings and who contributes what. And what percentage, and how do we onboard? That brings a lot of bureaucracy involved in it, and formality, which is probably a little too. It would be too heavy-handed right now, because I do think there's a nice organic fragility that I think it needs some time and space to grow a little bit more before we get to that point.
Great. I mean, I think the challenges you're facing are quite common for many networks, and I think that the fact you say that 2 years down the line is interesting. I think I think I would agree with that assessment, that it's better to figure it out first before you put it down in writing. Someone once said in an event that I went to about complexity theory, he was saying when the tortoise developed the shell, that was it. It stopped its evolution. And so I think sometimes networks, they start with the shell, and then it's very hard to deal with the inevitable challenges that they will face, and that the network structure should allow for flexibility and different responses. So thank you very much, Adanna. We want to keep these webinars short, and I know that if there are any more questions, they can get in touch with you. We will be sending out an email soon after this webinar with information about some of the resources that Adanna presented and more. And also, I think, Adanna, you're okay with us sharing your email?
Yes, very much so.
But you can find Adanna online. I think she's one of those people that's easy to find. And I encourage everybody else who's here, who's watching this video later, to join us for our free webinar series. We have a few more to come. Certainly for ours from Switzerland, UNICEF, Innocenti Research Center in Florence. We'll be talking about issues of great interest to think tanks and to the policy research community in the next couple of months. So join us again, and that's it from us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Adanna.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.